Emma Martinez had always been different from other 12-year-old girls in her neighborhood. While her friends spent their afternoons playing video games or chatting about celebrities, Emma preferred walking through the old cemetery behind St. Mary's Church. The ancient headstones and weathered angels fascinated her, and she found peace among the forgotten graves. It was a cold Tuesday evening in November when Emma discovered something that would change her life forever. The sun had already set, painting the sky in deep purples and grays. Most people avoided the cemetery after dark, but Emma felt safer there than anywhere else. Her parents were fighting again at home, their voices echoing through their small apartment above the bakery they owned. As she wandered between the moss-covered tombstones, Emma heard a sound that made her stop. It was soft whimpering, almost like a wounded animal. Following the sound, she found herself in the oldest section of the cemetery, where the headstones were so old that most of the writing had worn away. Behind a large marble monument depicting a weeping angel, Emma discovered a boy who looked about her age. He was curled up against the cold stone, his thin body shaking violently. His clothes were strange. They looked expensive, but old-fashioned, like something from a movie about the 1800s. His dark hair was messy, and his pale skin seemed to glow in the moonlight. "Hey," Emma whispered, approaching carefully. "Are you okay?" The boy looked up, and Emma gasped. His eyes were the most beautiful shade of silver she had ever seen, but they were filled with terror and confusion. He tried to speak, but only a hoarse whisper came out. "Please," he managed to say, "help me." Emma didn't hesitate. She had always been the kind of person who helped stray cats and injured birds. This boy looked more lost and frightened than any creature she had ever encountered. She took off her warm winter jacket and wrapped it around his shoulders. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Adrian," he whispered, his silver eyes never leaving her face. I can't remember much else." Emma noticed that Adrian's skin was ice-cold to the touch, far colder than it should be even on this chilly night. She also noticed that he didn't seem to be breathing normally. His chest barely moved at all. But she pushed these strange observations aside. All that mattered was that he needed help. "I'm Emma," she said with a warm smile. "Don't worry, Adrian. I'm going to take care of you." She helped him stand, surprised by how light he felt despite being almost as tall as she was. Adrian leaned heavily on her as they made their way through the cemetery. Emma lived only 3 blocks away, and she decided to take him home. Her parents might be angry, but she couldn't leave him alone in the cold. The walk took longer than usual because Adrian moved slowly, as if he were in pain. Several times he stopped completely and looked around with those strange silver eyes, as if he were listening for something Emma couldn't hear. "Are you running from someone?" Emma asked during one of these pauses. Adrian nodded, but didn't explain further. Emma didn't push. She had learned from helping animals that sometimes the best thing to do was just be patient and kind. When they reached the Martinez family bakery, Emma led Adrian through the back entrance that led directly to their apartment upstairs. The smell of fresh bread and pastries filled the air, and Emma noticed Adrian's nostrils flare slightly, though his expression remained confused rather than hungry. Emma's parents, Rosa and Miguel Martinez, were in the kitchen when she entered with Adrian. Their argument stopped immediately when they saw the pale, shivering boy. "Emma, who is this?" her mother asked, rushing forward with concern. "This is Adrian," Emma said firmly. "I found him in the cemetery. He's lost and cold, and he needs our help." Rosa's maternal instincts kicked in immediately. She took one look at Adrian's pale face and trembling form and ushered him to the couch. Miguel, though initially suspicious, helped Emma's mother wrap Adrian in warm blankets. "We should call the police," Miguel said quietly to his wife in Spanish, thinking Adrian wouldn't understand. But Adrian looked up sharply, and Emma noticed his silver eyes seemed to flash with something like fear. "Please," he said in perfect Spanish, "don't call anyone. I just need somewhere safe to stay tonight." This surprised the Martinez family. Adrian's Spanish was flawless but had an unusual accent they couldn't place. Emma sat beside him on the couch and took his cold hand in hers. "My parents are good people," she told him. "They won't hurt you." Rosa brought hot soup and bread, but Adrian barely touched the food. He held the warm bowl in his hands as if drawing comfort from its heat, but Emma noticed he didn't actually eat much. When Rosa wasn't looking, Adrian glanced at Emma with grateful eyes. "Where are your parents, Adrian?" Rosa asked gently. Adrian's face grew troubled. "I don't remember," he said honestly. "I woke up in that cemetery and everything before that is dark." Emma's father exchanged worried looks with her mother. A boy with amnesia was a serious matter, but when they suggested taking him to a hospital, Adrian became visibly distressed. "Please," he begged, grabbing Emma's hand, "I can't go there. Something terrible will happen if they find me." Emma squeezed his hand reassuringly. "Nobody's going to make you do anything you don't want to do," she said, looking meaningfully at her parents. That night, Rosa set up a bed for Adrian on the couch in their living room. Emma wanted to stay with him, but her parents insisted she go to her own room. As she lay in bed, Emma could hear Adrian moving restlessly downstairs. Several times she heard him get up and walk to the window, as if he were watching for something. Around midnight, Emma crept downstairs to check on him. She found Adrian standing at the window, still wrapped in blankets, staring out at the dark street. The moonlight streaming through the glass made his pale skin look almost luminescent. "Can't sleep?" Emma whispered. Adrian turned, and Emma was struck again by how beautiful and haunted his silver eyes were. "I keep feeling like something bad is coming," he said. "Like I'm putting you and your family in danger." Emma joined him at the window. "You're just scared because you can't remember what happened to you," she said reasonably. "Once your memory comes back, everything will make sense." But Adrian shook his head. "What if I don't want to remember?" he asked quietly. "What if the reason I forgot is because it was too terrible to bear?" Emma didn't have an answer for that. Instead, she sat with him on the couch and they talked quietly until dawn. Adrian told her about strange dreams he kept having. Visions of a vast castle with empty hallways, the sound of screaming, and always, always the smell of blood. When Emma's parents woke up the next morning, they found the two children asleep on the couch together. Adrian looked more peaceful than he had the night before, and for the first time since Emma had found him, he seemed to be breathing normally. Over the next few days, Adrian began to recover some of his strength. He helped around the bakery, though Emma noticed he was careful to avoid direct sunlight and seemed uncomfortable around the garlic Rosa used in her cooking. He was unfailingly polite and grateful, and Emma's parents grew fond of him despite their concerns. Emma and Adrian became inseparable. She taught him how to play modern games on her tablet, and he told her stories that seemed to come from some deep, half-remembered past. His tales were always about brave knights and beautiful princesses, but they had a darkness to them that made Emma wonder where a 12-year-old boy would have heard such things. At night, when her parents thought she was asleep, Emma would sneak downstairs to talk with Adrian. She learned that he never seemed to get tired the way she did, and she began to suspect that he wasn't sleeping at all, just pretending for her family's benefit. On the fourth night, Emma asked him directly, "Adrian, do you ever actually sleep?" He was quiet for a long time. "I don't think I need to," he finally admitted. "It's one of many things about myself that I don't understand." Emma accepted this strange confession without fear. She had already noticed many odd things about Adrian, the way his skin never seemed to warm up completely, how he barely ate despite Rosa's constant offers of food, and how animals seemed nervous around him. But none of these things frightened her. If anything, they made her more protective of him. "Maybe you're just different," Emma said simply. "There's nothing wrong with being different." Adrian looked at her with such gratitude that Emma felt her heart flutter. "You're not afraid of me," he said wonderingly. "Why would I be afraid?" Emma asked. "You're the gentlest person I've ever met." What Emma didn't know was that across the city, powerful forces were searching for Adrian. In the shadows of the night, creatures moved through the streets with inhuman speed and grace, following a scent trail that was growing stronger every day. They moved in packs, their eyes glowing with predatory hunger, and they would not stop until they found what they were looking for. At the head of this search was a figure of terrible beauty and ancient power. Lord Damien Blackthorn had ruled his kind for over 1,000 years, and in all that time nothing had ever been as important to him as finding his lost son. The boy who called himself Adrian was the heir to a throne of shadows, a prince of creatures that existed in the spaces between life and death. But Adrian's memories had been locked away to protect him from a terrible truth. He was not human, and neither was his father. They were vampires, the last of their royal bloodline, and Adrian's disappearance had left the entire supernatural world in chaos. As Lord Blackthorn's servants drew closer to the little bakery where Adrian slept peacefully beside his human friend, neither Emma nor Adrian realized that their peaceful days together were about to end. The vampire prince was about to remember who he truly was, and Emma was about to discover that the boy she had rescued was far more dangerous and important than she could have ever imagined. But for now, in the quiet hours before dawn, a human girl and a vampire prince sat together in comfortable silence, two lonely souls who had found friendship in the most unexpected place. Emma held Adrian's cold hand in her warm one, and both of them felt, for perhaps the last time, completely at peace. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Friday morning exactly 1 week after Emma had found Adrian. Emma woke up early, as she always did now, eager to spend time with her strange new friend before school. But when she crept downstairs, she found Adrian standing in the middle of the living room, his silver eyes wide with terror. "Adrian?" Emma whispered, approaching him carefully. "What's wrong?" He turned to look at her, and Emma gasped. Adrian's face was pale as marble, and his silver eyes seemed to be glowing with an inner light. When he opened his mouth to speak, Emma caught a glimpse of something that made her heart skip a beat. His canine teeth looked longer and sharper than they should be. "They're coming," Adrian whispered, his voice carrying a strange echo that seemed to fill the entire room. "I can feel them. They're so close now." Emma reached out to touch his arm, and she was shocked by how cold his skin had become. It was like touching ice. "Who's coming, Adrian? Who are you afraid of?" But before Adrian could answer, a sound echoed through the quiet morning air that made both children freeze. It was the sound of wolves howling, but there were no wolves in the city. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, a haunting chorus that spoke of ancient power and barely contained violence. Adrian's eyes went completely silver, and when he spoke again, his voice was different, older, more commanding. "Emma, you need to get your parents and leave this place, now before they find us." "I'm not leaving you," Emma said firmly, though her heart was pounding with fear. "Whatever's happening, we'll face it together." Adrian looked at her with an expression of anguish and love that seemed far too mature for his young face. "You don't understand. I'm beginning to remember what I am, and it's not safe for you to be near me." Emma was about to argue when her parents came rushing downstairs, awakened by the strange howling that continued to echo through the air. Rosa was clutching her bathrobe around herself, and Miguel had grabbed a baseball bat from the closet. "What is that sound?" Rosa asked, looking around frantically. "Animals," Miguel said grimly. "But they sound too big to be normal dogs." Adrian closed his eyes and seemed to be listening to something only he could hear. When he opened them again, his face was grim with determination. "They'll be here in minutes," he said. "Emma, please." "I'm begging you. Take your parents and run." But Emma had never run from anything in her life, and she wasn't about to start now. She moved to stand beside Adrian, taking his cold hand in hers. "We face this together," she said quietly. Before Adrian could protest further, the lights in the apartment suddenly went out. The only illumination came from the gray dawn light filtering through the windows. In that dim light, Emma could see Adrian's silver eyes glowing like stars. Then the temperature in the room dropped so dramatically that Emma could see her breath misting in the air. Rosa gasped and grabbed Miguel's arm as frost began to form on the windows. And in that supernatural cold, they heard something that made Emma's blood run cold. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps climbing the stairs outside their apartment. But these weren't normal footsteps. They seemed to echo with an otherworldly resonance, as if each step was being made by something far heavier and more powerful than a human being. Adrian suddenly straightened, and Emma was amazed to see that he seemed to be growing taller. The frightened boy she had been protecting for a week was transforming before her eyes into something magnificent and terrible. His silver eyes blazed with power, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Father," he whispered, and Emma realized with shock that he wasn't afraid anymore. He was angry. The footsteps stopped outside their door. For a moment, the world was completely silent. Even the strange howling had ceased. Emma could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Then came a knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks that seemed to shake the entire building. Rosa whimpered and moved closer to her husband. Miguel raised his baseball bat with shaking hands, but Emma noticed that Adrian stepped forward, placing himself between his human family and the door. "I know you're in there, my son," came a voice from the other side of the door. It was the most beautiful and terrifying voice Emma had ever heard. Rich and deep, with an accent that spoke of centuries of education and refinement, but underneath the cultured tones was something predatory and dangerous. "Come out, Adrian. It's time to come home." Adrian's hands clenched into fists. "I won't go back," he called out, his young voice trying to match the authority in his father's tone. "I remember now. I remember what you made me do." A soft, chilling laugh came from the other side of the door. "What I made you do? My dear boy, you are a prince of the night. What you did was your birthright."
Emma stared at Adrian in confusion.
"Adrian, what is he talking about? What did you do?" Adrian's face was tortured with remembered pain. "I killed people, Emma," he whispered, his silver eyes filling with tears that looked like liquid mercury. "I fed on them. I'm a monster." Before Emma could respond, the door to their apartment simply vanished. It didn't open or break down, it simply ceased to exist. Standing in the doorway was the most beautiful and terrifying man Emma had ever seen. Lord Damien Blackthorne stood nearly 7 feet tall, with long black hair that seemed to move with a life of its own. His skin was marble pale, and his eyes were the same silver as Adrian's, but filled with a cold fire that spoke of centuries of power. He was dressed in an elegant black coat that looked expensive and timeless, and when he smiled, Emma could see fangs that gleamed like pearls. "Hello, my son," Lord Blackthorne said, his voice filled with a terrible love. "I've missed you." Emma's parents cowered behind their kitchen counter, but Emma found herself moving protectively in front of Adrian. She was terrified, but she was also furious. This creature, whatever he was, had caused Adrian pain. She could see it in her friend's silver eyes. "Leave him alone," Emma said, her voice shaking but determined. "He doesn't want to go with you." Lord Blackthorne's ancient eyes fixed on Emma, and she felt as if she were being examined by something far older and more powerful than anything that should exist in the modern world. To her surprise, he smiled at her. Not a cruel smile, but one of genuine amusement and even respect. "And who might you be, little one?" he asked, stepping into their apartment with fluid grace. "I'm Emma Martinez," Emma said, lifting her chin defiantly, "and Adrian is my friend." "I won't let you hurt him." Lord Blackthorne laughed, a sound like silver bells and winter wind. "Hurt him? My dear child, I am his father. I love him more than my own existence." "Love?" Adrian stepped forward, his voice filled with pain and anger. "You call what you did love? You made me into a killer. You forced me to take innocent lives to feed your ambition." Lord Blackthorne's expression grew serious. "You are the prince of our kind, Adrian. We are vampires, the apex predators of this world. Taking human life is not murder for us, it is survival." Emma felt the world tilt around her. Vampires. Adrian was a vampire. It explained so much. His cold skin, his lack of appetite for food, the way he never seemed to sleep. But instead of being afraid, Emma found herself thinking of all the kindness Adrian had shown her, all the gentle conversations they had shared. He might be a vampire, but he was still her friend. "I don't care what you are," Emma said firmly, looking between Adrian and his father. Adrian chose to be kind. He chose to be gentle. That's what matters. Lord Blackthorn studied Emma with new interest. Fascinating, he murmured. A human child who shows no fear in the presence of vampire royalty. Adrian, where did you find such a remarkable friend? She found me, Adrian said quietly. When I had nothing and remembered nothing, she saved me. She and her family gave me a home. For the first time, Lord Blackthorn looked at Rosa and Miguel Martinez, who were still huddled behind their kitchen counter. His expression softened slightly. You took in my son when he was lost, he said to them. For that you have my eternal gratitude. We just wanted to help, Rosa stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Lord Blackthorn nodded gravely. Your kindness to my son will not be forgotten. He turned back to Adrian. But now, my boy, it is time to return to your true life. Our people need their prince. What if I don't want to be a prince? Adrian asked defiantly. What if I want to stay here with people who care about me without expecting me to be something I'm not? Lord Blackthorn's eyes flashed with something dangerous. You cannot run from what you are, Adrian. You are a vampire, a creature of the night, destined to rule over our kind. These humans, he gestured dismissively at the Martinez family. They are mortal. In the blink of an eye, they will age and die, while you remain forever young. You cannot build a life around creatures so temporary. Emma felt tears stinging her eyes at the cruel truth in the vampire lord's words, but she refused to give up. Maybe I can't live forever, she said, but the time we have is still valuable. Isn't it better to have real friends for a short time than to be powerful and alone forever? Lord Blackthorn stared at Emma for a long moment, and she thought she saw something like surprise in his ancient eyes. You would be willing to be friends with a creature who could kill you without effort, knowing that you will grow old and die while he remains young? Yes, Emma said without hesitation. Adrian is my friend. That doesn't change just because I know what he is now. Adrian looked at Emma with such love and gratitude that it broke her heart, but she could also see the conflict in his silver eyes. He was torn between his loyalty to her and his father's expectations. There's something else you should know, Lord Blackthorn said softly. The reason Adrian's memories were locked away was not just to protect him from trauma. There are others of our kind who believe he is not worthy to rule. They hunt him, seeking to claim the throne for themselves. As long as he remains here, he puts not only himself but everyone he cares about in mortal danger. As if summoned by his words, the strange howling began again outside, but now it was closer, and Emma could hear the sound of multiple creatures moving through the streets below. Lord Blackthorn's expression grew grim. They have found us, he said. Adrian, we must leave now. Your enemies will not show mercy to these humans simply because they helped you. Emma looked out the window and gasped. In the gray dawnlight, she could see shapes moving through the shadows, creatures that looked like wolves but were far too large and moved with too much intelligence. Their eyes glowed red in the darkness, and as she watched, one of them raised its head and looked directly at her. Its howl was filled with such malevolent hunger that Emma instinctively stepped back from the window. Werewolves, Adrian said grimly. Father, how many of them are there? Too many for us to fight while protecting humans, Lord Blackthorn replied. He looked at Emma and her parents with something like regret. I am truly sorry, but your association with my son has marked you. If we leave you here, they will tear you apart looking for information about where we have gone. Emma felt her world crashing down around her. In trying to help Adrian, she had doomed her entire family. But before despair could overtake her completely, Adrian stepped forward with renewed determination. Then we don't leave them behind, Adrian said firmly. Father, you have a castle with magical protections, don't you? Somewhere the werewolves can't follow? Lord Blackthorn nodded slowly. Castle Blackthorn has stood for 1,000 years, protected by ancient magic that no werewolf can penetrate. But Adrian, you cannot seriously be suggesting, I am, Adrian said, his voice carrying new authority. Emma and her family come with us, as my guests and under my protection. Emma stared at Adrian in shock. He was offering to take her family into his world, a world of vampires and magic and ancient castles. It sounded like something from a fairy tale, except fairy tales usually didn't involve quite so much mortal danger. The howling outside grew louder, and Emma could hear the sound of claws scraping against brick as the werewolves began to climb the building. There was no time left for debate. "Emma," Adrian said urgently, taking her hands in his cold ones. "I know this is crazy. I know it's dangerous. But will you trust me? Will you come with me to a world where nothing is what you expect, but where we can stay together?" Emma looked into Adrian's silver eyes and saw the boy who had sat with her in the cemetery, telling her stories of knights and princesses. She saw the friend who had helped her parents in their bakery and made her laugh with his old-fashioned formal way of speaking. Vampire or not, he was still Adrian. "Yes," Emma said without hesitation. "We'll come with you." Lord Blackthorn smiled, and for the first time it was a smile of genuine warmth. "Then it seems the prince has chosen his court," he said. "Very well. Everyone take my hands. This will feel very strange." As the werewolves reached their floor and began battering at their walls, Emma grabbed Adrian's hand and her mother's hand. Miguel took Rosa's other hand, and Rosa reached out to grasp Lord Blackthorn's elegant fingers. The last thing Emma saw before the world dissolved around her was Adrian's silver eyes, glowing with love and determination. Then everything went dark, and she felt as if she were flying through space and time, leaving behind everything she had ever known for a future she couldn't possibly imagine. When the werewolves finally broke through the walls of the Martinez apartment, they found nothing but empty rooms and the lingering scent of vampire magic. The prince had escaped them once again, and this time he had taken humans under his protection. In the supernatural world, this was unprecedented. Never before had vampire royalty claimed humans as part of their court. The implications of Adrian's choice would ripple through both worlds, changing everything for vampires and humans alike. But Emma didn't know any of that yet. All she knew was that she was still holding Adrian's hand, and that wherever they were going, they would face it together. Emma opened her eyes to find herself standing in the most magnificent hall she had ever seen. The ceiling soared at least 50 feet above their heads, supported by pillars of black marble carved with intricate designs that seemed to move in the flickering light of hundreds of candles. Massive tapestries hung from the walls, depicting scenes of great battles and elegant balls that looked like they belonged in a museum. "Welcome to Castle Blackthorn," Lord Damien said, his deep voice echoing through the vast space. Emma's parents stood nearby, clutching each other and looking around in amazement and terror. Rosa was whispering prayers in Spanish under her breath, while Miguel kept looking around, as if he expected monsters to jump out from behind the pillars. "This is incredible," Emma breathed, turning in a slow circle to take in all the details. The floors were made of polished stone that reflected the candlelight like a mirror, and everywhere she looked there were beautiful details. Carved doorways, elegant furniture that looked antique but perfectly maintained, and paintings of people with the same silver eyes as Adrian and his father. "It's also home," Adrian said softly, but Emma could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Or it was before I ran away." Lord Blackthorn began walking deeper into the castle, his elegant coat flowing behind him like wings. "Come," he said. "Let me show our guests to their rooms. You must be tired after such an ordeal." As they followed him through corridors lined with more tapestries and portraits, Emma noticed that they didn't encounter any servants or other people. The castle felt empty, like a beautiful museum after closing time. "Where is everyone?" Emma asked Adrian quietly. "Most of our people live in the city now," Adrian explained. "The old ways of living in isolated castles are mostly gone. Father and I are among the last who maintain the traditional residences." They climbed a grand staircase with a banister carved to look like a twisting vine. At the top, Lord Blackthorn led them down a hallway lined with doors. "And Mrs. Martinez," he said formally, stopping at an ornate door, "this will be your room. I trust you will find it comfortable." He opened the door to reveal a bedroom that looked like it belonged in a palace. The bed was enormous, with curtains of deep blue velvet, and tall windows looked out over gardens that Emma could just glimpse in the growing daylight. Rosa and Miguel exchanged nervous glances. "This is very generous," Miguel said carefully. "You protected my son when he was vulnerable," Lord Blackthorn replied. "I could never repay such kindness, but I can ensure your comfort and safety." He led Emma to the next door. "For you, Miss Emma, I hope it meets with your approval." Emma's room was smaller but no less beautiful. The walls were painted a soft lavender color, and the furniture looked like something from a fairy tale. There was a window seat with cushions where she could look out over the castle grounds, and shelves lined with books that looked very old and very expensive. "It's perfect," Emma said, meaning it. "Thank you." Lord Blackthorn smiled at her. "Adrian's rooms are just across the hall," he said, "though I suspect you two will spend most of your time together anyway." After showing them where everything was and explaining that meals would be brought to them since the castle's kitchens were not currently staffed for human food, Lord Blackthorn left them to rest. Emma's parents disappeared into their room, probably to discuss their impossible situation in private. Emma and Adrian stood in the hallway, suddenly feeling awkward with each other. Everything had changed so quickly. Just hours ago, Adrian had been a lost boy sleeping on their couch. Now he was a vampire prince in his family castle, and Emma was… what exactly? "Are you sorry?" Adrian asked quietly. "That you found out what I am? That you're here instead of at home?" Emma considered the question seriously. Her old life seemed very far away now. Her school, her friends, her routine, all of it belonged to a world where vampires and werewolves were just stories in books and movies. But as she looked at Adrian, still seeing the gentle boy who had told her stories and helped in her parents' bakery, she realized that she wasn't sorry at all. "No," she said firmly, "I'm not sorry. Are you sorry that I know the truth?" Adrian's silver eyes filled with relief. "I was afraid you would be frightened of me, that you would see me as a monster." "You're not a monster, Adrian," Emma said. "I don't care what your father says about apex predators and ruling over humans. You're the kindest person I know." They talked until the sun was fully up, sitting on the window seat in Emma's room and watching the castle grounds come alive in the daylight. Emma was amazed to see that the gardens were tended by what looked like moving statues, stone figures that walked around watering plants and trimming hedges. "Magic?" she asked, pointing to them. Adrian nodded. "Castle Blackthorn is protected by very old spells. The grounds maintain themselves, the walls are unbreachable by our enemies, and nothing can enter without Father's permission." "But it must be lonely," Emma observed, "living in such a big place with no one else around." Adrian's expression grew sad. "It is. That's why I ran away. Father had great plans for me, teaching me to rule, to command our people, to be the perfect vampire prince. But I didn't want to hurt people to prove my strength. When I refused to participate in some of his training exercises, we had a terrible fight. I used magic I didn't know I possessed to escape, but the effort was so great that it locked away my memories and left me powerless." Emma reached over and took his hand. "And that's how I found you." "That's how you saved me," Adrian corrected, "in more ways than one." Over the next few days, Emma and her family settled into an impossible routine. They lived in a vampire's castle, protected by ancient magic, while the modern world continued outside without them. Lord Blackthorn was an attentive host, ensuring they had everything they needed, but Emma could see that he was waiting for something. That something became clear when Adrian began to remember more of his powers. On their third night in the castle, Emma woke up to find Adrian floating 3 feet above her window seat, his silver eyes glowing as he practiced magic. He could move things without touching them, turn invisible for short periods, and communicate with the stone servants in the garden. "You're getting stronger," Emma observed, not at all frightened by the display of supernatural ability. Adrian lowered himself to the ground gracefully. "My powers are returning as my memory heals. Father says that soon I'll be strong enough to take my place as the heir to our kingdom." "Is that what you want?" Emma asked. Adrian was quiet for a long time. "I want to protect people," he finally said. Both humans and vampires. There has to be a way for our kinds to coexist without constant fighting and bloodshed. Emma smiled. That sounds like something a good prince would want. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion outside. Looking out the window, Emma could see lights moving through the castle grounds, not the gentle glow of candles or electric lights, but harsh bright beams that cut through the darkness like swords. Adrian's face went pale. "Those aren't friendly lights," he said grimly. They ran to the main hall, where they found Lord Blackthorn standing before the great windows, his expression grim. Emma's parents were there too, looking frightened but determined. "What's happening?" Emma asked. "The werewolf clans have allied with some of our own people," Lord Blackthorn said. "They're testing the castle's defenses, looking for weaknesses." "Our own people?" Adrian asked, moving to stand beside his father. "There are vampires who believe that associating with humans makes you weak," Lord Blackthorn explained. "They see your friendship with Emma and her family as evidence that you're unfit to rule. They've joined with the werewolves to try to force their way into the castle." Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the castle's temperature. "This is my fault. If I hadn't become friends with Adrian, none of this would be happening." "No," Adrian said firmly, his silver eyes blazing with power. "This is about fear and old prejudices. Our people are afraid of change, and the werewolves see an opportunity to seize power while we're divided." As if to emphasize his words, a thunderous crash echoed through the castle. The ancient magic protecting the walls was holding, but Emma could see cracks of light appearing around the great windows. "The defenses won't hold forever," Lord Blackthorn said grimly. "Adrian, if you're going to take your throne and lead our people, it has to be now." Adrian looked at Emma, and she could see the conflict in his silver eyes. Taking the throne would mean accepting all the responsibilities his father wanted for him, but it also meant having the power to protect the people he cared about. "What if I take the throne but do it my way?" Adrian asked. "What if I rule as someone who believes vampires and humans can be allies instead of enemies?" Lord Blackthorn smiled, and Emma realized that this was what he had been hoping for all along. "That, my son, would make you a king worth following." Another crash shook the castle, and this time Emma heard the sound of breaking glass somewhere in the upper levels. "They're getting through," Rosa said fearfully. Adrian straightened, and Emma watched in amazement as he seemed to grow taller and more commanding. The frightened boy she had found in the cemetery was gone, replaced by someone who radiated power and authority. "Father," Adrian said formally, "I accept my birthright and my responsibilities. I claim the throne of the House of Blackthorn and all the power that comes with it." The change was immediate and dramatic. Adrian's silver eyes blazed like stars, and Emma could feel power radiating from him in waves. The air around him shimmered with energy, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of centuries of tradition and magic. "As the Prince of Vampires, I challenge any who dispute my right to rule to face me in single combat," Adrian declared, his voice echoing through the castle with supernatural force. The crashes and sounds of breaking glass stopped immediately. Even through the thick walls of the castle, Emma could feel a presence outside, something ancient and powerful responding to Adrian's challenge. "They've accepted," Lord Blackthorn said with grim satisfaction, "the werewolf alpha and the vampire who leads the rebellion. They'll fight you together, as is their right when challenging established royalty." Emma grabbed Adrian's arm. "You can't fight them alone. You're still just learning to use your powers." Adrian looked down at her, and Emma was amazed to see that his eyes held no fear, only determination and love. "I won't be alone," he said gently. "I'll have what they don't, something worth fighting for." The great doors of the castle swung open without anyone touching them, revealing the night beyond. Adrian walked forward with the grace of someone born to command, and Emma followed without hesitation. If Adrian was going to face danger, she would be there to support him. Outside, the castle grounds had been transformed into an arena. Hundreds of creatures lined the gardens, vampires with glowing eyes and elegant clothing, werewolves in various stages of transformation, and other beings that Emma couldn't identify. At the center of the space, two figures waited. The werewolf alpha was massive, standing nearly 8 feet tall in his half-transformed state. His eyes glowed yellow and his claws gleamed in the moonlight. Beside him stood a vampire who looked ancient and cruel, his pale skin marked with scars that spoke of countless battles. "Prince Adrian," the vampire called out in a voice like breaking glass, "I am Lord Vance, and I challenge your right to rule. You have shown weakness by associating with humans. You are unfit to lead our kind." Adrian walked to the center of the arena, and Emma was amazed by how calm and confident he looked. "Lord Vance," he replied formally, "I accept your challenge, but know that my association with humans is not weakness, it is evolution. Our kinds can be allies instead of enemies." "Prove it," the werewolf alpha growled, his voice barely human. What followed was the most terrifying and magnificent thing Emma had ever witnessed. Adrian moved with fluid grace that seemed impossible, dodging claws and fangs with supernatural speed. When he fought back, his attacks were precise and controlled. He could have killed his enemies multiple times, but instead he fought to subdue rather than destroy. The battle raged for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Emma watched in terror and pride as Adrian demonstrated not only his power, but his wisdom. When the werewolf alpha lunged at him with killing intent, Adrian could have met the attack with lethal force. Instead, he used his magic to bind the creature in place. "I don't want to kill you," Adrian said, breathing hard but still in control. "I want to find a way for our peoples to coexist." Lord Vance, seeing his ally defeated, made one last desperate attack. But Adrian was ready. With a gesture, he surrounded the ancient vampire with a cage of silver light that made Vance cry out in pain. "Yield," Adrian commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. For a moment, Emma thought Vance would continue fighting. But then the ancient vampire looked around at the assembled crowd and seemed to realize that he had lost not just the battle but the support of his people. Many of the vampires who had come to support his rebellion were now looking at Adrian with new respect. "I yield," Vance said bitterly. "But this is not over, boy prince." Adrian released him from the silver cage but kept his power ready. "Yes, it is," he said firmly. "I am Prince Adrian Blackthorn, heir to the vampire throne, and I decree that from this day forward, humans under my protection are to be treated as honored allies, not prey." A murmur went through the assembled crowd. This was unprecedented in vampire history. But as Emma looked around, she could see that many of the creatures seemed intrigued rather than angry. The werewolf alpha, still bound by Adrian's magic, spoke up. "And what of our ancient enmity, vampire prince? Will you make allies of us as well?" Adrian considered this carefully. "Our peoples have been enemies for too long," he said finally. "If you're willing to try a new path, then yes. We can be allies instead of enemies." Emma felt tears of pride running down her face as she watched Adrian transform from a frightened, lost boy into a leader who could change the world. When he released the werewolf alpha and offered his hand in friendship, she knew that she was witnessing the beginning of something truly special. Over the following months, Emma's life became something she could never have imagined. She lived in a castle with her family, protected by vampire magic and surrounded by creatures from myths and legends. But more importantly, she watched her best friend grow into his role as a leader who brought peace between ancient enemies. Adrian established schools where vampire and human children could learn together. He created treaties between werewolf packs and vampire covens. He proved that friendship and understanding were stronger than fear and prejudice. Emma became known throughout the supernatural world as the human girl who had saved the vampire prince, but she preferred to think of herself simply as Adrian's best friend. She helped him navigate the challenges of ruling, offering the perspective of someone who had never been bound by the old ways of thinking. On quiet evenings, they would still sit together and talk like they had in those first days when Adrian was just a lost boy in need of help. He would tell her about the responsibilities of leadership, and she would remind him to stay true to the kind heart that had made her want to help him in the first place. "Do you ever regret it?" Adrian asked one night as they sat in Emma's tower room, looking out over the peaceful castle grounds. "Giving up your normal life to live in this strange world." Emma considered the question, looking around at her incredible room in a magical castle, thinking about all the amazing creatures she now counted as friends, and most importantly, looking at Adrian, no longer a shivering, frightened boy, but a confident young man who was changing the world for the better. "Never," Emma said firmly. "My life might not be normal, but it's exactly the life I was meant to live." Adrian smiled, his silver eyes warm with affection and gratitude. "Thank you, Emma, for saving me, for believing in me, and for helping me become who I was meant to be." Outside their window, the gardens of Castle Blackthorn were filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation as vampires, werewolves, and humans worked together to tend the magical plants. It was a sound that would have been impossible just a year ago, but now it was simply the soundtrack of their daily life. Emma Martinez, the baker's daughter who had once found a shivering boy in a cemetery, had helped change the world simply by showing kindness to someone in need. And as she sat with her best friend in their magical castle, surrounded by the fruits of their friendship, she knew that sometimes the most extraordinary adventures begin with the simplest act of caring about another person. The vampire prince had found his throne, but more importantly, he had learned that true power comes not from inspiring fear, but from inspiring love. And it all started with a young girl who wasn't afraid to help a stranger in need. A young girl rescued a shivering boy overlooked by all. Hours later, his dad, the vampire Monarch, arrived.